Welcome, Ian, to the next instalment of the podcast. Hooray!
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. How did we meet? We met on the gig. I was doing sound for you, wasn't I?
That's right. I've just finished a tour, and on one of those dates on the tour, I think Neston, was it?
That was it. Yeah,
you
Neston.
did the sound.
Yeah, I did the sound. Yeah,
and that was I was glad to see a smiling face. Glad to see somebody who knew what they were doing, because I'd had a bit of trouble with that gig leading up to it. I had to get the Union Jack removed from the stage because it was a British Legion, but it was supposed to be part of a music festival. And I think they thought that, they think that I had my own PA and microphones and all that. I said, this is not a cabaret band. This is something else. But I couldn't get them to understand it. We got there in the end, and the gig was great.
Yeah, we got there in the end. Yeah, it was a brilliant show. It was amazing. Yeah, it was
lovely,
so good to watch.
Night,
it.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was lovely. So, for guests and things that kind of they've been following your career, or even guests, I suppose, who sort of are unfamiliar. How did you first get into music, and how did you first start off?
I was inspired by a particular event and a particular night, which was the Jam. I went to see the Jam at the Liverpool Empire on the first night of their All Mod Cons tour, and I went with all the other kids in the street. I kind of tagged along. I wasn't particularly like a fan or anything. I just went because all the kids were going, and it just took my head clean off my shoulders. What I witnessed, your first gig, it's like going to the match for the first time. And you see the green pitch and you can't believe it. Well, the first gig with the huge PA and the crowd and your ticket and the support acts, the noise and the excitement. And then they came on, and, it was the conviction with which Paul Weller delivered the songs that he'd written, which really must have hit me really hard. It hit me so hard and so true that it's still kind of the artistic fuel that I run on to this day.
Interesting.
It was such a road to Damascus type thing for a 14-year-old to see.
Yeah.
So that is, I kind of swore to myself at this point, I'm going to do that. And it was that point. Like that looks fantastic. And I had one major problem, is that I'd never held a musical instrument, didn't know if I could do any of it.
Is a problem, isn't it, for a music career?
Well, there was no musical instruments in the house. There was none on our estate. There was none in the family. So it was a question of like having to go through all of that, where you get one and you try. And I didn't even know to hold it left-handed or right-handed.
Right.
I certainly didn't know.
So literally no idea.
Know how to tune it. I couldn't hear the notes. I was just the classic thing that I got a guitar and stood in front of the mirror for 3 months throwing shapes. Still do that now though. So. Yeah. So that was how I got. That was my moment,
Yeah, that was the inspiration for doing it. So where did you study it in school or anything like that, or did you have a teacher?
I think I probably had the same experience. I went to a comprehensive school in Ellesmere Port. I had the same experience as everybody else, is that music lessons in school put you off music.
And it's still true, I think.
Mrs. Jobber, who was our teacher, she rose to anger really quickly, and she'd throw the board rubber at you, and it was like a hell of a projectile to come flying at you. And the only other thing I remember about was she'd put Godspell, the Christian musical, on the record player and insist we all listen to it. And that was it, and it was totally uninspiring. I was getting remotely schooled in music by Paul Weller and Elvis Costello and Joe Strummer and Jean-Jacques Bonnel and Ian Jury and Blondie and Chrissy Hind, from the records I was buying. But I might as well have not done music in school. I don't know what it's like these days, but it was useless back then.
Interesting. So you getting inspired by Paul Weller was the thing that made you pick up the guitar and presumably start learning a few chords and all that stuff. How did you get into songwriting then? And
I guess that came with the package of seeing the Jam, was that because he was singing with such visceral conviction and he was singing his own songs down in the tube station at midnight, you know, then it kind of, that came with the package that I wasn't going to learn how to play the guitar and perhaps learn how to sing to
just imitate it.
You know?
Right.
I was going to use it, you know, the whole punk ethic of DIY. I was going to create myself. That was just a given that came with that particular gig. And I was lucky at the time because I just mentioned a load of the artists, but this was a great era. Yeah. You know, for a 14-year-old with his cement wet.
How many bands were coming out then that was just like everyone?
It was out my generation. I was too young and too uncool to actually be a punk or a new wave or whatever. You know, that was never going to be. I was kind of quiet, but I was a year zero kid. You know, that whole thing about punk was year zero, and everything that had gone before was irrelevant. I love that as a 14-year-old. Listen to my generation's music.
I've got something new to say.
Yeah. And my mother absolutely adored the Stranglers along with me.
Right.
We'd go and see them together, you know. So that was great.
Yeah, and so the whole, you know, getting inspired and writing the music and starting to learn it and hone your craft and stuff it's kind of one event, isn't it? It's all sort of all glued together very much. It's all linked.
Yeah.
What, you know, at what point then did it start to be, you know, you're getting fans, you're starting to, you know, and obviously you're curting labels and things like, you know, when did that all kind of happen?
Well, I was quite a late starter to be able to play the guitar because when as I say, I struggled with the very basics, you know, because we had nobody to tell us. And eventually I really mined deep into myself until I hit a seam of musicality and I discovered that I could do it. And then and I was playing with other lads in my year at school and we kind of formed our own band. And then when we left school, we kind of dedicated ourselves to it. You know, I blagged me mum and dad with saying, I'm going to go do O-levels somewhere, you know, and rather than proclaim I'm going to be a musician because they might have clamped down on me. So I kind of just blagged it. And then once we formed our first band, we knew that, you know, the road to take was to write your own songs and to try and get a record deal.
Yeah, right.
That was it. We didn't know anything else. And we tried my very first band. We were called When in Rome, and then we changed our name to Joseph Groom Towers. And we just kept writing songs and going round and round in a circle, getting better and better and better, sending our little tapes off, getting rejection letters. So there's hundreds of labels back then.
Yeah.
And then we do gigs and try and get somewhere. Eventually, we actually got offered a deal by Magnet Records, but that fell through because they got bought out by Warner Brothers. So you had to, you know, the machinations of the music industry was happening to us. And we got on the chart show in Channel 4. That was the height of that band, my first band out of school. So we got really, really close, and we were at it for about a good 7 or 8 years. So it kind of felt like, God, this is never going to happen. This is just, you know, and every moment of every waking day is focused on writing music, trying to get a record deal. That was the holy grail. Trying to get signed was the holy grail. And you'd be listening to music all of the time and talking about it constantly. And eventually that band split up. The others got sick of you know, almost getting there and then getting slapped in the face. So, but I was never going to give up. So I formed a new band, which I called Pele.
Yeah.
And we got a record deal within 2 years.
Wow.
So in 1991, we got signed to Polydor, M&G. And everything I'd wanted since I was a little kid came true.
Wow. Yeah.
But I remember getting signed. And we had a manager, something I didn't have in my first band. We didn't even understand what one of them might do. You know?
Right.
And when we got signed, the manager said, right, we've got you a great agent. I was like, oh, what do they do? Well, they book you gigs. So we said, and come and meet the PR. What's that? You know, they'll get you on the television or they'll get you in the music press. Oh, I just thought those sort of things happened, you know?
Yeah.
And then the next one was, right, we'll sort you out a publishing deal, get you some money. But you've just given me some money for the advance, you know?
Yeah.
No, you're the songwriter, so you're going to... So I didn't know about any of those things.
Right.
And I'm signed now, you know?
Yeah.
And they just looked... It was like it was like they were just coming at me thick and fast, these things that we were so naive.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the whole structure of what happens to you when you sign to a major label is in front of us.
Yeah.
And it was a big learning curve immediately.
I can imagine. Yeah. And for a kid as well, like we were just saying before, weren't we? Like, it's like when you're a teenager, you've no idea about any of that and how it works and why you need it. And it's boring. Well, it's really boring.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I'm into my 20s now.
And yeah.
You know, and I'm like, I don't know what PRS is. I don't know what PPL is, but I'm being told I've got to sign up for all these things. Yeah. And you're getting so much information thrown at you. And of course, you know, all you want to do is play your songs.
That's it. That's it.
You're not interested in all of that.
No.
You know, if I think about it now, say we played at Loughborough University and we sold 100 of those, you know, iconic Pele t-shirts, I never asked where the money went to.
Yeah.
I was just happy that, oh my God, there's 100
pay
people.
for these t-shirts, by the way?
And are we getting any of the money? It never even came across my mind.
Yeah.
Now, much later on, I run my whole, you know, business.
I know
where everything goes. But back then, I was just thrilled that there was 1,000 people singing along to your songs and loving you. It never dawned on me to worry about. Of course. You know, so how's things being paid for?
In the show, I remember you saying, what was the single, the Pele single that sort of soared? Was it in a country or something that you said that it particularly got picked up somewhere?
Yeah, we had more hits abroad than we did in the UK. They were all like minor hits in the UK. And we had quite a few playlists on Radio 1. They played the music quite a lot. But we had a number one in South Africa.
That was it. That was
which was mad because we didn't even know it had been released in South Africa.
Right.
But of course, if you're on Polydor, you're getting released all over the world and nobody tells you.
Of course.
But it just so happens I had a friend who'd recently emigrated there. And he phoned me up and said, "You're at number one in the South African charts." And so I told her, we were supporting Kirsty MacColl in Leicester that night.
Wow.
I'll never forget. So I said to our manager, my mates just said this, but I think he was a bit drunk as well. And so while we were on stage, he got in touch with Polydor and they got back and went, "Yeah, we've just checked it. It's true, you know."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was kind of getting set up for us to go out there and cash in on it all. And then the Musicians Union got in touch and said there's still a boycott, cultural boycott, because the instruments and apparatus of apartheid still haven't been dismantled.
Right.
There hasn't been any free elections yet. I think that happened in '93 when the ANC got voted in for the first time. Mandela had come out of prison, but there was still a boycott in place in there.
Right, interesting.
And we would have been blacklisted. And because I'm a left-wing gobshite, I would have been going against everything that I'd ever said. So I just went, okay, well, that's what happens. If you have ethics and beliefs, you're going to get tested on them one day.
Of course.
And if you fail the test, then you're just an empty vessel, aren't you?
Yeah, of course.
I went, okay, we're not going to go.
Good for you. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I don't regret it, obviously, because it doesn't really matter. So,
no, it doesn't. And, we were talking about family and stuff before, before this and stuff. That's what's important.
Yeah,
and all that's important.
Yeah. And it's a good story to tell all these years later.
Yeah. So, a lot of artists, when they first start out, a lot of them, in my experience, they tend to, they write a bunch of songs, and it could be like, this one's for rock, this one's for pop, this one's like an indie thing, this is a folk song, this is and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And gradually, they learn to hone their message, their identity and stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like you did that really early on, because I feel like from watching the show, even it felt you had a really clear, like you just said, like a left wing message. It was like a really, how important is that to you in terms of?
I think you're right. And it is a key mistake for any artist to try and chase something.
Right.
Because if you're chasing a sound or the latest thing, it will disappear in front of your eyes and then there'll be something else. And if you chase that, and then, you're got to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
So I think you have to stand still and it will come to you.
Interesting.
Eventually. Especially if what you write about is filled with conviction and it's from the heart. I don't consider myself a political songwriter at all, because that's just paints yourself into a corner of
right.
of life, and there's so much more human experiences that can go
course.
into my songs. You know, they're not. There's very few like polemical, you know, ranty sort of political songs in my set. It's all human stuff to me, and I think you do have to find your own musical identity, and I found mine kind of, you know, I'd had the whole new wave and punk thing, and then was great music that I'd listened to in the 80s. People slagged the 80s off, but there was actually lots of great music.
Oh, definitely.
You know, we had the Smiths and Prefab Sprout.
Absolutely.
And all of this sort of stuff. But then in 1987 and 1988, there were two albums which were to have a profound effect on my songwriting. One was an album called Tunnel of Love by Bruce Springsteen, which was the first time he'd written a set of personal songs.
Right.
And it's a heartbreak album. And the other one, a year later, was Fisherman's Blues by the Waterboys.
Oh, yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Which opened me up to Celtic soul music. The sound of the, you know, Irish music specifically colliding with rock and roll, which I found incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
And I found it so moving, some of it, that again, that was my second moment of being hit really hard. And I started that inspired a lot of songwriting. I wrote a song called Fireworks at this time, and everything came into focus. And I haven't really gone away from that.
Yeah, interesting.
That is my thing.
Your thing, yeah.
And it'll always be like that, I think, now.
The show that I watched was, you know, it's so like sort of like that Cayley band influence, isn't it? You know, with like whistles and the flutes, and but you got the violin.
But it's grounded in...
But grounded in
what we used to call pop music.
And pop indie kind of music. Yeah.
Because it's, my songs are very traditionally structured, you know, verse, chorus, middle eight, big bit at the end or whatever. There's no, you know, I'm not experimental in that fashion at all. But and when I play with traditional Irish players, I have to tell them exactly what to do. There's no jamming on this song.
Right.
The notes in this riff go like that.
Like this. Interesting.
And it might sound like that to the audience, but it's not. There's a lot of strict structure to what's going on. The flavors, though, are often coming from that world.
Yeah,
you know, from a Celtic soul world, really. And I got that off the Waterboys. And as time moved on, you know, it happened that the uncrowned king of Irish music, Christy Moore, did one of my songs.
Oh, wow.
And I became friends with Christy, and Damien Dempsey, who's a very dear friend of mine, who is one of the greatest Irish artists of all time.
Yeah,
not the greatest. And hearing him for the first time was seismic, you know.
Yeah.
Because he sounds like a mountain, you know.
Yeah.
And so I kind of naturally fell in with that world of music.
Wow. So with, you know, because the show, as you said, is really refined and really honed. And even though, as you said, it feels there's moments of improvisation and all that stuff going on, it's clearly really like rehearsed and tight. What, you know, to what extent is that important for bands nowadays? If, you know, because everyone's got this perception and it's like, if I do well on TikTok and I put something out there that's good there, I don't really necessarily need to work at the live thing. What do you think about that one?
Well, you know, playing live is where the most fun is that you have doing this job, you know. I call it a job, it's a life calling, you know, but it's playing live out to the audiences is the best fun. And I absolutely, my favourite part of it as well is when I'm playing to a room that don't really know me. You know?
Right.
I love that challenge. Like we did just done 2 tours, the last 2 tours with Elvis Costello here in the UK. And you've got, you know, 1,800 people in the room, 10% know your songs, maybe another 40% had heard you.
Yeah.
But the rest of them are wondering, who the fucking hell is this guy? You know,
this?
And I love that because I'm going to use every little bit of my experience and skill to turn them on to whatever it is we're doing.
Yeah.
And if by the end of the show they get it, and then that's incredibly satisfying.
Yeah.
And then of course, you know, you can go out and do the merch, talk to people. You know, I've made great friends doing that. I've had for 20, 30 years from meeting them, talking about music.
Right.
And just turning people on. I love the challenge.
Yeah.
You know.
So the live things, I mean, I completely agree. I think the live thing's just so much fun. It's so important. There's nothing like that communal feeling of being in a place, a venue, a pub, a festival or whatever, and just cheering a band on and going, this is amazing. This is so good.
We went to see Springsteen in Madrid last week, and he turned an 80,000 stadium into the cavern. He really did. And it's a sight to behold. I've seen him, 30 odd occasions, and he was as good as he's ever been, and he's 74 because he's got that thing. He's working his balls off, but he's got that thing whereby tonight we're going to let it all hang out. You know? And whatever troubles you've got, whatever it is, we're going to touch them all, and we're going to, say we've got to keep going. Yeah. And that's what I try and do with our show.
Yeah, definitely.
A little bit of, you get some rabble rousing, you definitely get some tears, you get a bit of fun, a bit of daftness, but then you just get, music trying to raise your spirits.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever had any problems with bands? Like, like the band politics or any of that stuff, or,
with band members and stuff?
Getting it together and rehearsal time and all that stuff.
I mean, when we had Pele, we were like 5 very different, eccentric personalities.
Right.
Were very separate because the way that it had come together. And when you get stuck on the road with them in the back of a van
for months,
for 5 years, we drove each other mad. So, and it had the facade of being a democracy. But it can't be, because I've written the songs, I'm singing them.
Of course.
I've give it the direction. But they would challenge me all of the time, I want this B-side, I want that B-side. And whilst I didn't mind that, I remember feeling it's just so ungrateful. If I was fighting with one of them or whatever. But I don't get anything like that now, because it's not a democracy. It's it's a benign dictatorship.
Yeah.
And that's the way that it works, So we don't really have any like band politics like that.
Yeah.
As such, now that I'm older, why would you?
Well, it matters far less, doesn't it? To get involved.
Your stripes, and if somebody doesn't like it, they just won't play with you.
That's it. Yeah. Do you do any like social media or anything? Do you have any of that kind of presence, or have you?
Yeah.
You do.
I have experienced all of the models of being a musician in the music industry, from the major label deal, with the huge advance and everything working for you at your fingertips, to the indie deal, and nowadays to the cottage industry, where you use little bits and pieces of all different things, of which the central core of it is social media. So I have experience with them all, and they all have pitfalls, and they all have great things about them. So there's no one, it's much better now. I make much more money now.
Yeah.
Because if I sell a CD for $12.99, I keep the $12.99.
You keep the $12.99.
That didn't happen when
it's
we were
not
on the major
out.
label.
Yeah, of course.
So, I think you're on like 12% of something that you're never going to attain. When you're on a major label, it's called being in the hole, which meant that you always owed them money.
Yeah.
So, but one thing that it requires now is constant social media attention, which I don't mind. I quite like it, because, I think it's probably because I'm an only child. So I was so bored when I was young and like lonely. That nowadays I really enjoy people's company and interacting with other human beings. I love that. For me to put stuff up on social media, whether it be something about a gig I'm doing, or a conversation about, say, one of our songs or whatever, or something political, or just something daft that everybody in the country is talking about, or whatever it is, I engage at all levels, at all times.
And you enjoy that as well.
I like it, yeah. I like doing it. And I've got, the thing is about people who like my music, people have been with me for a long time, say 10, 20, 30 years. I know them all. They all feel like friends. You know? And if I go to a gig, I can recognise at least half the faces in the audience, which is absolutely lovely. And So yeah, I get involved on social media.
Yeah,
and I do like it. I know a lot of my contemporaries who don't.
Yeah,
and they don't understand it, or they don't feel as though they're prepared to break that fourth wall between the band, the musician, and their audience. Whereas I'm, very happy to do the old Clash doctrine of there's no barrier.
There is no barrier.
Between, the dressing room door is flung open, the fridge door is flung open. Come in, get yourself a beer, whatever you want to talk about. I'm here. So that was a Joe Strummer thing, which I'm happy to carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you think is it important for younger artists and aspiring artists to do all that, or do you think it's kind of it works for you, but it might not necessarily work for anyone else? Or
yeah, I guess some people wouldn't feel comfortable with it, but others would. I run the Monday Club at the Cavern, so I see all the young artists coming through.
That's right.
And at the end of their set, often one will say, "And get me on here, get me on there, get me, on all the social media."
Yeah.
You kind of don't need to say that now, because you just got to be on there.
Yeah.
You're not. It's not going to work unless you
completely.
And if like a major label came in for me tomorrow and said, "We want to do," if Universal said, "I want to do your next album," I'd just say no, because they just wouldn't know how to do it as good as me, and they wouldn't give you enough money to do it, and they'd probably want all of your merch and all of this, and it's just not it wouldn't work for me. I put it out, I put the CDs and the vinyl and the t-shirts and everything else into the envelopes, and I'll hire in a PR team to work for me. And I have some dear friends and a great label, Kitchen Disco Records, who help me out with all of the artwork and everything. And it's all of a really high standard. So it's a little cottage industry. And that is the way to actually, make some money.
Definitely.
You do need a good agent.
Yeah.
That's an absolute key. If you've got a good agent that can put you on in the places you need to be seen, or get you good support tours, then, and I've got a great one in Sarah. So
how would you suggest, someone go about doing that, getting an agent or that kind of thing?
I think you have to find out who they are, and if you do a specific type of music, just supposing you sound like Talking Heads, find out who the Talking Heads agent is, or who they, or other bands that maybe sound like in your style or genre or whatever. Find out who looks after them, and then approach them or whatever, And it's easy to get in touch with people these days.
Because
I get 3 or 4 messages a day from people who I don't know, who want to either ask me something about one of my songs, or how they want to buy one of the albums, or just to say hello, or so-and-so said to say hello at a gig. And I answer every single one. I never leave them unanswered. So I think you've got to, pay your audience respect.
Definitely. So it's a case of kind of being bold, get in touch with the people you need, and Do you think managers are important still, or do you think
they
you
can
should,
open up certain doors for you? And of course, you've got to be robust and have a thick skin, because you will get knocked back. You will, say you're trying to get on a certain festival and it doesn't work, and it is disappointing. But you've got to kind of take it on the chin, and then try and go again on it, and try and work out, what it is that didn't work in your favor this time. And then realize that, there's only certain amount of slots, and it might not be because they don't like it. It's just that it
just logistically doesn't work that way.
So there's a lot of bands, artists trying to get into very few slots and positions, and on the airwaves or whatever it is. So you've got to be tenacious, So you have to be mentally strong with the whole thing.
Do you have any kind of advice for that? Because I definitely see that all day long. People, it's very difficult, isn't it? Taking rejection, or you didn't make that slot, or you didn't, or the tour didn't go as well as you thought, or you didn't make as much money, or you didn't. Do you have anything in particular that is your refuge for as a a home in the storm?
Life is tough. And it's going to be tough for every single person. There's going to be something that'll come along that you haven't seen coming, which will knock you for six.
Yeah.
It's going to happen to everybody, whether you're from a richer background or a poor background or whatever it is. So you've got to learn from that. You've got to learn. You got to take the pain, and it will make you stronger. It will make you more resilient for next time around. If you never take any pain or you fold at the first sight of
hurdle,
it, then there'll be just another one behind you that'll get in the queue. You've got to be tough.
Yeah,
that's the thing I've found. I've had to be really mentally tough, and often when you haven't felt like it, but with the disappointment, God, I've had some crushing disappointments in my career and in your private life as well. But they all make it a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
And I think that really, really helps you as you go along.
It's part of the tapestry of it all.
And you can write about it as well. That's your job as a songwriter and an artist, is to write about that so you can communicate with other people who feel like that in the instance of their lives, and they feel better about it. So you make that direct communication with somebody to go, I got dumped and I can't breathe, my heart is breaking. And you write about that, and then it just helps somebody
to understand or channel it, or
absolutely. And then that feels like you've done something really successful.
Definitely.
Never mind record sales or concert attendances. Just at that moment.
I was gonna ask you about your songwriting process, and you were saying that kind of your structures are sort of very, no surprises and things like that. But do you have anything, that, for a songwriter? I remember Here I Lie. I remember that night I was watching, I was like, oh, what a beautiful song, and a great
lovely
story as well. I don't know if you mind sharing that story as well, on how you wrote that.
I'm inspired by things that happen to me as I go along, and I kind of report them in my songs in a way. And one of which we were talking about before we started was your children. And later on in life, out of the blue, I was going to be a dad. I thought, gee, how's this happened? But I found it the most wonderful experience. And as we were saying before we started, you can't even begin to explain how much you love them and how much it's outside all of your other experiences. And I'd had a lot of living before Rosalita came along. And then all of a sudden, there's this new world of just cosmic love. And I tried to put it into song. I wrote a song called God and Man, a song called Maybe There Is a God After All. So I'm invoking the divine here, and I'm not religious at all, in an attempt to try and put it in. And then I wrote a song called Here I Lie, which is kind of the closest I've got to making that connection with how you feel about your children when they're born. And the idea of the song is that when I'm not around anymore, hopefully way into the future, if Rosie's having a bad day, if a boss has pissed her off or a partner's upsetting her, then she can come and find wherever they put me in the grave. I want to be buried, so, and she can just sit by the grave and talk. And because she knows the song exists, it's like making a circle. And it's a spiritual thing, I suppose. But she's like, she knows that the song has been written, and she knows that if she speaks to me about a bad thing, she gets them out. And in some cosmic way, music defeats death itself at that point. And it's a high-flown idea, I know, but if anything can do it, it's music.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously at that, I wrote it for our Rosie, and it's almost like a functional folk song in a way for her to use, like they used to write songs for people to sing in the fields, or when they were building the canals or whatever, they'd all sing these songs. So it's a bit of a functional song in that sense. But then it stops being just for me and our Rosie, and it becomes everybody else's.
Right.
And I have people talk to me at the end of gigs, they want to cuddle because of that song, And it's not mine then, it's all of ours. And it's not just father and daughter, it's grandfathers and sons, and and the whole of family and our ancestry, and all of it comes into one.
Yeah.
So that was the idea of it.
It's a beautiful song. It was. I mean, you got such a great repertoire of songs, but that one for me, I remember on the night, I was sort of that's beautiful. That's really
That's beautiful for me to hear, because that's like job done.
Yeah.
You managed to make that connection.
Yeah,
which you don't always do, but you're always striving to get there. So
that surely is the important thing, isn't it? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, mate. So just to kind of bring it all together and to wrap it up, there's, I'm a young artist and I've got my guitar and I've got my set of songs and I'm trying to be the next Ian Prowse and I'm trying to get out there and get a record deal. I'm trying to do all that stuff. Have you got any tips? Have you got any tricks, ideas, anything at all that you think is like a route or a pathway or something good for people to sort of...
I mean, there's so much more these days than what we had when I was starting. If I wanted to know how to play a D minor, I had to go and find somebody and say, what's D minor? Whereas now you can just look on your phone or whatever.
Yeah.
So there are a lot more things. And at the very beginning, from a practical thing, you can come to our Monday club at the Cavern every single Monday in the Cavern pub. We've been running for 13 years. And we have a strict law that you can't do cover versions. You have to do your own songs. So that inspires people to go, okay, I'm going to write a song. So that puts you in that mode as soon as you enter the club. And you'll also meet lots of other like-minded people, and there's a community there. So if you're looking at putting a band together, you might find drummers or bass players or whatever.
Right.
And you can watch your contemporaries and you can make your judgments go, they're further down the line than me. That's a better or a cleverer song than I've done. And you can step into that world. There is an element of competition about it all, of course, because we're all, trying to
be the one that stands out.
Attention. Yeah. So from a practical point, people are very welcome to come to that. And we have a lot of female singers come on their own. They feel very safe to come into that. So I'm very proud of that as well. But from a songwriting perspective, I just think you've just got to write honestly and openly about the things that you care about. You've got to, Springsteen always says, your obsessions, you've got to make other people care about them in your songwriting. And he does it with cars. I have no interest in cars. I haven't got a car. I can drive, but I haven't got a car. I've never had one. But I'm fascinated with cars with Bruce Springsteen. He's got a song called Racing in the Streets.
Yeah.
And he lists car parts. I'm like, wow. But because it's not really about cars is obviously the point.
Of course.
It's about the human experience. Yeah. And it's one of the best songs you'll ever hear. So that is what you've got to do. So whatever it is that you care about as a human being and a songwriter, is you've got to communicate that to your potential audience. And what it'll always boil down to at the end of a long day is your human connection with other people, and to make that, to build that bridge to them. And that's what you've always got to bear in mind, and do it with conviction, like, I was lucky when it happened to me at the age 14, the Jam, they wanted to change the world with the music they were making. It was ferocious, and the Clash. This is the only band that matters, and I love all of that. That they're not just playing music because they can play music.
Yeah.
They're going to listen to Queen if you want to do that. This is you want to change the world. You're up to the brim with conviction, and that's just passion for meaning it, really, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you think from developing that passion and, developing great songwriting and things like that, is it the case that labels flock to you at that point, or is it something, or what would you say is your advice on getting in touch with them and how do you attract it? And,
what happens is if you have, you're obviously going to have your influences, and people will say, oh, they sound like this or they sound like that. Everybody has that. But also all the bands that are good and start to get somewhere, they also have something which is uniquely theirs. Every single band has that. They add something to the party. Yeah. There's been great bands which they look like a facsimile of bands that have gone before. Like when the Jam came out, everybody just berated them as Who copyists.
Right.
But there was clearly something about them which
was unique.
It was unique. And that is the key. That is what will get you attention by any label manager, agent, or anybody. If you have something which is just yours, and it might only be 5% of what it is you're doing, and the rest might be easily identifiable bits and pieces from other, artists and modes of music. But as long as you have some of put all your personality into it, is the thing, be inspired by other people, but also, let yourself pour into it is what I'd say about that.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you.
Mate,
I really appreciate you coming on the show, and
anytime.
Really appreciate it.
Good questions as well.
Thanks, mate.
Cool.